All right, so welcome back to the deep dive where we, kind of like help make sense of the past and, really complicated topics.
Yeah.
And today we're diving into something pretty heavy.
Yeah.
A primary source that's really remarkable, but also just really disturbing to read.
Absolutely.
So we're going to be talking about the diary of Thomas Thistlewood.
Ooh, yeah.
And if you can just imagine like a window into the day-to-day life of a Jamaican sugar plantation in the 18th century, this is exactly what we have with this diary.
It's pretty incredible.
It is.
Yeah.
So this diary spans from 1750 to 1786.
Wow.
And we're not talking like a little tiny notebook.
Right.
This thing is massive. It's 10,000 pages.
10,000 pages.
10,000 pages of close written manuscript.
That's a lot of writing.
It is a lot of writing, and it's all pretty much just like raw, unfiltered, look into what life was like.
It's such a valuable resource because you get that intimate detail, and it's from his perspective entirely. So you're really seeing how a plantation was managed during this time, and also learning about the lives of the enslaved people who were faced to labor there.
Right. And I think for me, the thing that is just so disturbing about it is that it's like you said, it's from his perspective. So you're really seeing how he thought about this system.
It's disturbing.
It's incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
And so Thistlewood, he arrived in Jamaica when he was 29 years old. And initially, he started out as a pen keeper.
A pen keeper.
Managing livestock,
Right.
But he eventually acquired his own property, and this diary is all about that property.
Gotcha.
And he was very meticulous, so he documented everything.
But wow.
Everything.
Like what?
Like weather patterns, crop, yields, his daily interactions with the enslaved community on his property.
So we can really see how he treated the people that he enslaved.
Absolutely. And it's, it's tough to read.
Yeah.
So I think our aim today is really to confront just the realities of Thistlewood's world.
Yeah.
We're going to look at the violence, the sexual exploitation, the racial domination that were just like baked into this system.
Absolutely.
And I think, it's one thing to kind of learn like the basic historical facts.
Right.
But I think, today we really want to understand like how these power structures work. Like what was the mindset?
Yeah. What allowed this to happen?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, let's start off by looking at how did Thistlewood even maintain control?
Okay, so as an overseer and later a property owner, Thistlewood had an incredible amount of power over the enslaved people at Egypt Plantation.
Egypt was the name of the plantation.
Egypt, that's right.
Yeah.
And the diary entries are filled with accounts of corporal punishment. And what's really striking as you go through these entries is how often it happened. And the casual way he talks about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a rare occurrence. It seems like it was routine, a normal method to keep order and keep everyone working.
Right. And, he's not shying away from describing it in detail.
Oh.
Like you read about floggings for things that seem so minor to us today.
Yeah.
People being put in the stocks for really long periods of time. And, if you've ever seen historical illustrations of the stocks, it's...
Oh, it's brutal.
It's brutal. It's dehumanizing.
Absolutely.
And he talks about other types of physical abuse as well. And I think what's so chilling about it is just this like matter-of-fact tone.
Right.
It's not like he's agonizing over these decisions. It's like, no, this is just what you do.
Just part of the job.
Yeah, you have human property. This is how you manage it.
That's the mindset, isn't it?
It's a horrifying mindset.
Yeah, it really is. This wasn't like random acts of cruelty. It was a system. It was calculated violence used as a way to control people.
Right. And if we think about the broader context of slavery in the Caribbean, you see, this wasn't unique to Thistlewood.
No, not at all.
Or his plantation.
The threat of violence and the use of violence was everywhere. It was the heart of the system of slavery. It was about instilling fear, crushing any resistance, and maintaining that rigid power structure between the master and the enslaved.
Right. The master-slave relationship was all about domination.
Exactly.
And Thistlewood's diary just shows us how brutal that domination really was.
It's horrifying.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just physical domination.
Right.
The diary also exposes something else that's incredibly disturbing about colonial power.
What's that?
And that's the sexual exploitation of enslaved women.
Yes.
You hear this term slave wife.
Right.
And Thistlewood's relationship with a woman named Phoebe is a really stark example of just how widespread this was in Jamaica.
Yeah. And what we have to understand here is that there's no agency. There's no consent.
Right.
Thistlewood goes into detail about his sexual relationship with Phoebe, and he also mentions other encounters with enslaved women.
And these aren't relationships like we would understand them.
No, of course not.
Right.
This is about power.
Yeah.
This is about objectifying enslaved people, especially women. And when you look at the bigger picture, this sexual exploitation is completely intertwined with racial domination.
Right.
Enslaved people had no control over their labor, their family lives, their own bodies.
Right. It's like they were just seen as property available to be used in any way that the enslavers wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's really uncomfortable to face this, but it's an essential part of understanding just how barbaric this system truly was.
And, these weren't just isolated incidents.
No.
The fact that Thistlewood records these encounters so frequently shows us that this was a pattern of exploitation that was everywhere in the colonies.
Absolutely. It was endemic to the entire colonial enterprise.
And I think, this raises another really important point. Like, how did this exploitation reinforce the whole idea of racial domination?
Well, by denying enslaved people control over their own reproductive lives and their physical selves, the colonizers could further cement their status as property.
Right.
And it reinforces that racist idea that they weren't fully human beings with their own rights, their own desires.
Yeah, it's like it stripped away their humanity.
Exactly.
And that brings us to another really disturbing aspect of the diary.
What's that?
Which is the way that Thistlewood dehumanizes the people he enslaved.
Right.
You see this clear hierarchy in his writing based on race, white Europeans at the top and enslaved Africans at the bottom.
Right.
And his language, the way he describes them, it reflects the racist attitudes of the time.
And how does he refer to the people he enslaved?
Well, that's the thing. It's so disturbing because he often reduces them to their capacity for labor.
Okay.
Like he's talking about them like they're tools or animals.
Oh, wow.
He'll use phrases like, my Negroes.
Oh, my goodness.
In the same way he might talk about his livestock or his farm equipment.
It's just awful.
It's awful. And this linguistic dehumanization, it's a huge part of how they were able to justify this system.
Yeah, you have to create that psychological distance.
Right.
To allow yourself to treat people this way.
Exactly. And even when he talks about illnesses, deaths, or even aspects of their personal lives, it's always through this lens of how does it affect the plantation?
Yeah.
Or how does it affect him?
Exactly.
He might mention the death of someone who worked in the fields and then immediately start talking about needing to find a replacement.
That's so dehumanizing.
It's incredibly dehumanizing. And it really highlights the fact that the people he enslaved had no agency in his eyes.
Right, they're just cogs in the machine.
Exactly. And their lives were completely controlled.
Yeah, under constant surveillance.
Everything they did was dictated by him.
And, it's important to remember, here, we're only getting one side of the story.
Absolutely.
The voices of the enslaved people are missing from this diary.
Right.
We're only hearing from the oppressor.
It's like a huge imbalance in the historical record.
It is a huge imbalance.
But I think even with that said, you can still learn a lot about the colonial mindset by reading this diary.
Right. It gives us a window into how a white planter in 18th century Jamaica saw the world. Their assumptions about race, about labor, about the social order.
It's like a really disturbing look into how they justified this whole system.
And I think what's really unsettling is how they rationalized the brutality.
Right.
The exploitation of other human beings.
It's like they convinced themselves it was okay.
Yeah. And when you think about the cultural context of the time, European ideas about racial superiority, about colonialism.
Right.
This shaped their worldview.
Yeah.
It was normal to them.
Exactly. It was normal.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Thistlewood.
No, this was a widespread belief system.
It was deeply embedded in their ideology.
It was.
And so the violence, the exploitation, it just became normalized.
Right.
Like he talks about these events in such a casual way. It's chilling.
Yeah, it's like it was just the way things were. It wasn't seen as extraordinary or wrong.
And I think that's what's so disturbing about it.
It is disturbing, the normalization of these horrific acts. It speaks to the power of societal structures to distort our sense of right and wrong.
Yeah, it's like, how can a society create a system of such oppression and have people participate in it without really questioning it?
It's a question we have to ask ourselves.
So to really bring this to life, I think let's look at some specific examples from the diary.
Okay.
We don't have time to go through every single entry, but there are so many instances of people being flogged for things that seem so minor.
Like what?
Like laziness or trying to escape.
Of course.
There are mentions of people being put in the stocks for days at a time.
Oh, wow.
Exposed to the weather, humiliated in public.
That's awful.
It's awful. And the justifications he gives were often so petty.
Like what kinds of things?
An act of insolence, A task that wasn't done exactly the way he wanted.
Right.
Even just being in a place that he didn't think they should be.
And he didn't hesitate to punish them severely.
No, he didn't. And, like I said, he writes about it all in this really detached, almost bureaucratic way.
It's like he's just checking off a list.
It's chilling. And then you have casual mentions of his sexual encounters with enslaved women.
Right, woven into the everyday details of plantation life.
Exactly, like the entries about his relationship with Fibba. It's like they're just routine.
Alongside notes about the crops and the weather.
Yeah, it's like it was just another part of his day.
Right, and it just shows how much they saw the sexual exploitation of enslaved people as their right.
Absolutely.
And when you look at how Thistlewood refers to these individuals throughout the diary, you see this pattern of dehumanization again and again.
Right.
He often only identifies them by name when it directly relates to something he's doing. Right. Their families, their personal histories, their thoughts, their feelings, it's all missing.
It's like they don't exist as individuals.
Right. And even when he talks about someone being sick or injured, it's always about how it affects their work.
Right. Are they still able to labor?
Exactly.
And it's so dehumanizing.
It is. But, even within this limited perspective, we do get glimpses of the individuals trapped in this system. Right. We learn the names of some of them. Yeah. Fibba Cuba, Minber Davy Joe.
And so many others.
And these brief mentions are so powerful.
Yeah.
They remind us that these were real people.
Each with their own story.
Their own struggles.
And I think it's important to remember that the plantation itself was a place of immense suffering.
Absolutely.
The boiling house where they processed the sugar.
Right.
The provision grounds where they grew some of their own food.
The living quarters.
It's like the backdrop for all of this violence and exploitation.
It's a stark reminder of the physical reality of this system.
And it's really crucial to contextualize Thistlewood's account.
Right. This wasn't just one man being cruel.
No.
This was a systemic problem.
This was slavery in the West Indies.
Exactly.
And, sugar plantations were the economic engine of these colonies.
Absolutely.
And enslaved labor was the fuel.
Right.
The wealth that Europe accumulated was built on the backs of these people.
And Thistlewood's diary shows us the human cost of that wealth.
It's a chilling reminder of what this system was truly like.
It is.
So as we wrap up, I think it's important to recap what we've learned from this diary.
Okay.
We've seen the routine violence that was used to control people.
Yeah.
The widespread sexual exploitation of enslaved women.
The deep-rooted racial domination.
And the colonial mindset that allowed all of this to happen.
Right. And as disturbing as these primary sources are, they're essential for understanding the horrors of slavery.
Absolutely.
They help us move beyond the statistics and see the human impact of this system.
And, as we end this episode, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay.
We've spent this time looking into the realities of plantation life in 18th century Jamaica.
Right. Through Thistlewood's eyes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to ask ourselves, how do these historical power dynamics, how do they shape our world today?
That's a big question.
It is a big question, and I think it's one that we all need to grapple with. We encourage you to keep learning about this period, explore other primary source accounts, read the work of scholars who are studying slavery and the Caribbean.
It's an important part of understanding who we are.
It is, and it's a journey that I think we all need to take.
I agree.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.